take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Well, on the earth.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Tuesday, December 20th, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us here. We are just a few days away from the Christmas holiday and the Hanukkah holiday. That's right, this year both Christmas and Hanukkah start on December 25th. So happy holidays to everybody out there. And for those of you celebrating Festivus for the rest of us, that's coming up. Let's see, that'll be on Friday, I guess. So get your aluminum pole out. Remember, no decorations on the aluminum pole, just the aluminum pole. We'll begin with the airing of the grievances, of course, and then we'll have our feats of strength. That's coming up on the Friday edition of the Russ Belville Show, our special Festivus for the Rest of Us edition. Coming up on today's show, all sorts of news to dish here on Cannabis Radio. We'll begin with our Cannabis Radio news, and in the headlines today, some new polling data out of my home state of Oregon shows just how popular marijuana legalization is. We'll also tell you about some plans in Colorado to crack down a bit on their grow allowances there. We've got the Maine legalization is official. They've dropped the recount. Thank God, because I already got my back tattooed with Maine shaded in. I didn't want to see what it was like to have to unshade that. But there's some more details we want to tell you about Maine, so that's coming up in the news as well. And our island territory of Guam is turning toward cannabis legalization. We'll tell you what's going on way out east. Or west. I guess depends on which direction you go. Also, we've got some data on the sales of alcohol in the states that have legalized marijuana that is pretty interesting for us to get to, and a look at medical marijuana for hospice patients in Connecticut. That's coming up right after this first break in the Cannabis Radio News. Then we'll get around to our Behind the Headlines segment, which I want to elaborate a bit on something I ranted on yesterday, and that is it still civil disobedience if it makes a profit? We're talking about Mark and Jody Emery and the cannabis culture case going on up there in Montreal, Canada, where the two activists were arrested for opening up 6 more dispensaries. Then we'll take a look at our drug war data mines. In the data mines today, there was a headline in the Washington Post about the increase in use of medical marijuana by mothers to treat their morning sickness, when they're puking and nauseous and they've been using marijuana. And the Post says this is not a good thing. We'll take a look at some of the studies and the data regarding maternal marijuana use coming up in drug war data mining. Then at 1:30, a very important segment, we have got one of the most knowledgeable human beings on the subject of cannabis on the planet on our show. Normal's Deputy Director Paul Armentano is joining us to tell us all about the scheduling of cannabidiol, or CBD oil. This has been in the news a lot lately because of the DEA issuing a new rule regarding the classification of marijuana extracts. And there's a lot of CBD oil companies out there trying to convince people that the DEA is overstepping its bounds, that CBD derived from hemp is perfectly legal. We'll get the dirt from Paul Armentano, the true facts on CBD oil, coming up at 1:30 in our Government at Work segment. Also on the show today, we'll have time for a radical rant. I want to ask, why doesn't legalization get the credit for reducing youth drug and alcohol use to its lowest levels ever recorded? We got the newest data from the Monitoring the Future study. I've been digging deep into it this morning, and I got some serious questions. Also, coming up in hour 2, we'll take your calls at 650-LEGAL-MJ. We're going to talk about psychedelics for depression based on one of your calls. Also, optimistic takes on cannabis in Trumpistan and the fallout in the state of Maine over legalization. Stay tuned. The news is next.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Cannabis use isn't the only thing growing. So are we. Grow with us. CannabisRadio.com.
Do you want to get in on the booming cannabis industry? With New Frontier Data, we give industry insiders the power of big data analytics to help navigate this rapidly growing and changing landscape. New Frontier's tools help you make critical decisions based on the facts. Our industry analyst reports reveal the best opportunities, our custom research engagements deliver answers to the most difficult questions, and our cutting-edge big data platform, Equio, puts real-time information and answers you need right at your fingertips. Go to www.equio.io and sign up for your free membership today. That's EQUIO.io to sign up now. The power of real-time big data is now in your hands. Run with New Frontier and let us help you conquer the wild.
I'm Radical Russ from the Russ Belville Show.
Washington, it has passed. The news organizations are calling it.
So they just did call it officially for 64.
Tell everybody in the red states how great legal weed is. Yeah, looking forward to legal weed here in the state of Oregon. It's the Russ Belville Show, the NPR of POT, weekdays live at 6 Eastern, 3 Pacific, exclusively on CannabisRadio.com.
The Russ Belville Show, providing dictionaries to drug czars since 2009.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Tuesday, December 20th, 2016. 2 years after Measure 91 passed in Oregon, 2 out of 3 Oregonians surveyed have a favorable view of the legalization of marijuana. Furthermore, 1 out of 4 Oregonians had used a marijuana product in the past month. DHM Research surveyed nearly 800 Oregonians on their opinions regarding marijuana and banking. Federal rules still make access to traditional business banking services next to impossible for cannabis-related firms. Nearly 9 in 10, or 87%, said that offering financial services to the legal marijuana industry would either not alter or improve their impressions of their financial institution. Only 12% of respondents indicated disapproval of their bank serving the marijuana industry, which was half as much as the disapproval for banks serving big box stores like Walmart, a third of the disapproval for pharmaceutical companies, and a fourth of the disapproval for tobacco companies. Hoping to preserve its marijuana law under the next president, Colorado is planning a slate of legislation designed to crack down on pot that is grown legally but then sold on the black market. Colorado allows medical pot patients to grow up to 99 plants, far beyond other marijuana states, and it also allows recreational users to group their allotted 6 plants into massive co-ops, entire greenhouses of pot that aren't tracked or taxed. Proposals include a ban on group recreational pot grows and a new paperwork requirement for people who grow medical pot. The government's plans outlined to lawmakers in advance of the 2017 legislative session include a statewide 12-plant limit in private homes, which is still more generous than other marijuana states such as California with 6 plants and Oregon with 4 plants. The results of a Maine referendum on the legalization of marijuana in the state will likely head to the governor's desk this week. Maine voters narrowly approved legalization of recreational marijuana in November. A group campaigning against legalization dropped a request for a recount on Saturday. A spokeswoman for the Maine Secretary of State's office says on Monday that the results will most likely be certified this week and then sent to Governor Paul LePage. He will have 10 days to issue a proclamation of the results. After that, the law would take effect in 30 days. LePage, a Republican, has questioned whether legalization of recreational marijuana can be implemented in the state. Maine already had legal medical marijuana. LePage's office didn't immediately respond to a request for comment on Monday. Guam Governor Eddie Calvo has proposed legalizing recreational marijuana on the island with heavy taxation. The Pacific Daily News reports that Calvo announced the plan Monday, just a week after he vetoed a bill that would allow medical marijuana patients to grow their pot at home. Calvo had cited concerns about the cost of regulating residential grow operations. The governor turned his focus this week to recreational marijuana, which he says could generate tax revenue to fund public safety and education. He says he wants Guam to learn from other states that have legalized recreational amounts of marijuana. Legalizing marijuana may be affecting the sales of alcohol, boosting legalization advocates' case that the two are substitute goods, but threatening more opposition to future legalization by the alcohol industry. The report from Cowan & Company shows that the beer business is underperforming in the longtime craft beer meccas of Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, where recreational cannabis use has been legalized. In those markets, craft beer is slowing, but the biggest drag is on mainstream beer producers. Those companies' economy beer volumes are down 2.4%, and premium domestic volumes, Bud Light, Coors Light, etc., are down 4.4%, writes Vivian Azer, Cowan & Company's managing director. Denver is under the most pressure, he said, noting total beer volumes in that market have fallen 6.4% year to date, and craft beer volumes have dipped 5%. The nation's first hospice plans to study how medical marijuana can help dying patients. Officials from Connecticut Hospice, Inc. in Branford said Monday they hope to improve pain management while also reducing opioid use in palliative care. They also want to decrease nausea and vomiting while improving patients' appetites and overall well-being. Last week, St. Francis Hospital in Hartford announced it received state approval to begin studying the effectiveness of medical marijuana as a painkiller for traumatic injuries. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Tuesday, December 20th, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
We don't limit how much you smoke, and we don't limit where you listen. Cannabis Radio is now on iTunes, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio.
Equio, New Frontier's cutting-edge big data platform, puts the information and answers you need right at your fingertips in real time to help you more effectively run your cannabis business. Go to www.equio.io to sign up for your free membership today. Again, that's www.equio.io. Run with New Frontier and let us help you conquer the wild.
It's time for Cannabis Facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com, the National Wildlife Refuge for Marijuana Unicorns.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
This weekend, Canada's best-known marijuana activists, Mark and Jody Emery, were arrested by police in Montreal for their role in opening 6 new outlets for their cannabis culture marijuana dispensary franchise. Recently, a federal task force in Canada recommended that sales of marijuana be made legal to all adults 18 and older. They noted that while health officials cite 25 as the age at which brain development is complete, and therefore the marijuana minimum age should be older, keeping the age too high would maintain underground market sales and hamper the success of legalization. Yet Montreal's Mayor Denis Coderre, in reaction to protests over the arrest of the Emerys, maintained his stance that, quote, "the law is the law," end quote, and had not been changed yet. He expressed, quote, "zero tolerance," end quote, for their actions, characterizing them as a threat to order and a self-serving public relations, quote, "stunt," end quote. Canada's Liberal government came to power in the most recent federal election, partially because of the party's open support for legalization of cannabis. Yet Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who repeatedly campaigned on the legalization issue, has joined the Montreal mayor's condemnation of the Emerys, saying, quote, "until we've changed the law, the current laws exist and apply," end quote. These reactions from the elected officials are to be expected. What I didn't expect was some of the reaction from the cannabis community. Quote, "most Canadians are sick and tired of them," claimed one of the messages in my inbox, "and their predatory approach to celebrity activism," end quote. Celebrity activism. I received other comments in that vein, accusing the Emerys of merely seeking attention to build their business brand and make money. One said, quote, "stop blindly defending the Emerys. They are the enemy of legalization," end quote. Now look, everybody's got their haters. Trust me, I know this. But what amused me most about the comments was in comparing how other activists who've done similar acts of civil disobedience in the medical marijuana world, how they were characterized at the time. Because back in 2013, my home state of Oregon was busy passing a law to legalize medical marijuana dispensaries. This legislation and the legislature were spurred into action by activists who, like Mark and Jody Emery, saw a need for legal cannabis access that was going unfilled and created a business to fill that need. Of course, back before the bill was passed, the law was the law, and the current laws existed and still applied. So Oregon's drug warriors mounted one last offensive just a week before the law was to pass. It was called Operation Storefront, and they raided 3 dispensaries located in the north, south, and east of the state. But when my friends Sarah Bennett and Don Morse, Lee and Lori Duckworth, and Bill Espenson were arrested and jailed by authorities, you didn't find marijuana activists in Oregon demeaning their bus as a result of some sort of self-aggrandizement or self-enrichment. No, these were freedom fighters. That was the general consensus. They were bold, daring activists, putting their freedom on the line to bring safe access to life-saving medicine to poor, needy patients. And the police and prosecutors were the enemies of legalization, not the people flouting the law against marijuana sales. The dispensaries that were busted in Oregon served as the models that led to the 2013 law being passed in the first place. Oregon's legislature was in no hurry to legalize dispensaries until the activists and, yes, entrepreneurs began civilly disobeying the law by opening storefronts. Similarly, Mark and Jody Emery are opening cannabis culture locations in an act of civil disobedience to push the Trudeau government to live up to its promise to legalize cannabis sooner rather than later. Just because the customers standing in line for legal access to cannabis in freezing temperatures aren't necessarily sick doesn't demean the patriotism of the civil disobedience. Montreal is choosing to bust the Emerys. It's not as if Montrealers are flooding Mayor Corder's office with demands to shut down the cannabis culture shops. And compare that again with my home state of Oregon. We passed our legalization measure in November of 2014, but our rights didn't kick in until July of 2015. So for 7 months, the law was the law, and the current laws existed and applied, but most of our counties' prosecuting attorneys deferred to the will of the voters and didn't bother charging people who were caught with small amounts of marijuana.
Oh, Piggy can run.
This is a choice by the Montreal government. They're emboldened by a prime minister who endorses mindlessly following a law that he himself promised to overturn. The Emerys should be lauded for their civil disobedience, whether it makes them a loony in profit or not. We're back with some drug war data mining on marijuana for morning sickness right after this.
Maui Wowie, Acapulco Gold, California Kush. Our strains stretch everywhere too.
This is the Cannabis Radio Network.
Cash?
Sorry.
I don't carry around cash, and I don't want to use the ATM and pay surcharges.
You don't need to carry cash. Haven't you heard about PayQuick?
Okay, tell me about PayQuick.
It's the safe and easy way to pay. It works just like your debit card to securely pay for your purchase, and it gives you rewards points every time you use it.
Nice.
PayQuick, the safe and easy way to pay. PayQuick.com.
Tommy Chong Show on Cannabis Radio. You know, about this podcast, what I really want to do from now on is to solve world problems. I feel like my job is to calm everybody down and focus on how we can save this planet.
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome to my world.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals, or at least they pay me to say that. A public service message from CannabisRadio.com and the Russ Belville Show.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Today in the Data Mines, we take a look at the headline in today's Washington Post that states, quote, "Pregnant women are increasingly using marijuana for morning sickness. Study finds that's not good." End quote. Really? It's not? Look, if you're paying any attention to my social media feeds, you know that I'm a cisgender male, so maybe I'm not completely up to date on the latest treatments for puking pregnant women. So what exactly does the Washington Post say? Well, according to the Post report, quote, "The findings present potentially serious medical concerns because of earlier studies indicating that infants who were exposed to marijuana were more likely to be anemic, have lower birth weight, and be placed in neonatal intensive care than infants of mothers who did not use marijuana. According to the study published Monday in the Journal of the American Medical Association, nearly 4% of pregnant women between the ages of 18 and 44 reported in 2014 that they had used marijuana in the past month, compared with 2.4% in 2002. Quote, "Some of the sources on the internet are touting marijuana as a solution for the nausea that commonly accompanies pregnancy," end quote, said Nora D. Volkoff, director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, writing in an editorial published online with the study. However, she said, quote, doctors must be aware of the risks involved and err on the side of caution by not recommending the drug for pregnant patients, end quote. That's from the Washington Post. And this morning sickness that we're referring to euphemistically is actually a medical condition known as hyperemesis. And it isn't just an inconvenient breakfast interruption. On the website fitpregnancy.com, they note that Britain's Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists say 4 out of 5 pregnant women experience morning sickness throughout pregnancy. And despite it being called morning sickness, it can strike all day, every day. Jonathan Schaefer, MD, is an associate professor at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. And he explained that the issue of whether or not to treat morning sickness with medication is complicated, saying, quote, nausea and vomiting in pregnancy is extremely common and the ranges from occasional discomfort to miserable experience with weight loss, dehydration, and inability to tolerate any food at all. While the low end of the spectrum may be amenable to non-prescription treatments such as bland foods and ginger, the more severe symptoms will usually require some help in the form of medication, end quote. Medication. Okay, so we want to make sure that the pregnant ladies don't smoke the pot, but what sorts of medications? Well, the most common prescription recommendation I could find in my research was a combination of vitamin B6 and the sleep aid Unisom. Unisom. I wonder what the possible side effects are from Unisom. This according to WebMD, quote, drowsiness, dizziness, headache, constipation, stomach upset, blurred vision, decreased coordination, or dry mouth, nose, or throat, mental or mood changes such as hallucinations, irritability, nervousness, and confusion, ringing in the ears, trouble urinating, easy bruising or bleeding, fast or irregular heartbeat, seizure, rash, itching or swelling, especially of the face, tongue, or throat, severe dizziness, or trouble breathing. Yeah, Unisom. Just give that a shot. Don't smoke the pot, though. How about the vitamin B6? Well, the vitamin B6 seems to be all right. Just don't take too much of it. This again from WebMD. B6 is possibly safe when taken by mouth in amounts greater than the recommended dietary allowance. In some people, it might cause nausea, vomiting, stomach pain, loss of appetite, headache, tingling, sleepiness, and other side effects. During pregnancy and breastfeeding, it's likely safe for pregnant women when taken under the supervision of their healthcare provider. It is sometimes used in pregnancy to control morning sickness. High doses are unsafe. High doses can cause newborns to have seizures. Okay, that's the most recommended, Unisom and B6. Now, NPR looked at this issue back in October, and while Dr. Volkoff and NIDA are convinced by the science that implicates cannabis as dangerous to use for morning sickness, relying, of course, on this science for B6 and Unisom, despite this, from NPR, quote, when researchers combed through the more than 13,000 studies that addressed morning sickness, they found that just 35 were robust enough to be relied upon. One study found that vitamin B6 could help with nausea, but that it didn't reduce vomiting any more than a placebo. Another study found that higher doses of B6 helped reduce symptoms of morning sickness better than lower doses. But again, you don't want to go too high. It could cause seizures in the newborn. Continuing, some over-the-counter and prescription allergy medications seem to help with morning sickness, although they are considered safe. They do have side effects like drowsiness and headache, so they're recommended as a second-tier offense. A few studies directly compared the effectiveness of morning sickness treatments. 4 compared ginger to vitamin B6 and found that ginger was just as good, and in one case better, at reducing nausea. But of course, that's just a plant. It couldn't possibly help. And by the way, they have some other drugs. There's prochlorperazine, clopramazine, thorazine, trimethylbenzolamide, ondansetron, doperamol, diphenhydramine, Benadryl, metoclopramide, Reglan, and corticosteroids have all been recommended by doctors to help pregnant moms deal with their morning sickness. Now, look, I'm never going to be pregnant. So if I were, though, and my chances or my choices were to stop puking every day were either these pharmaceuticals with some of these side effects that might work sometime later, or to take a couple puffs off the vaporizer pen and stop puking now, I think I'd probably defer to the vape pen. Besides, if there were Any severe risks of birth defects from the moderate use of cannabis by pregnant women? Don't you think we'd see a dramatic difference in the children of Rastafarians? Dr. Melanie Dreyer published science on this 2 decades ago and found no significant difference between the babies of ganja-smoking moms and their non-smoking counterparts.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
How high do you like your profit margin? CannabisRadio.com.
Equio, New Frontier's cutting-edge big data platform, puts the information and answers you need right at your fingertips in real time to help you more effectively run your cannabis business. Go to www.equio.io to sign up for your free membership today. Again, that's www.equio.io. Run with New Frontier and let us help you conquer the wild.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
We need to build a wall.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details. Reforming America's marijuana prohibition laws takes education, lobbying, and voting. From Washington, D.C. to your state capital to your city hall, marijuana law reform involves all levels of civic life. Learn how you can make your impact with elected officials as we take a look at our government at work. All right, welcome back today in our Government at Work segment. We have got Paul Armentano on the line, the Deputy Director of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Russ.
Well, we've got you here for a very important topic, and I'm sure you've been talking to death about this since it came out, and that is the Drug Enforcement Administration announced a little while ago a new sort of code to deal with marijuana extracts, and it's got a lot of people in the industry and in marijuana reform up in arms with this notion that somehow the DEA is overstepping its authority and making CBD illegal, as if it weren't already. So we got Paul here to clarify some stuff. First of all, Paul, give our listeners a rundown on what this action was by the DEA. What exactly did they do?
Well, first of all, this is not a new action. This was a rulemaking proposal that the DEA opened up for public comment 5.5 years ago. And at that time, virtually nobody had anything to say about it. In fact, only 5 entities posted 6 separate public comments in the Federal Register at that time with regard to this rulemaking proposal. And the reason, I presume, that most people were not particularly interested, much less outraged about this proposed rule change, was that it has very little, if any, actual effect on public policy. The DEA itself has since clarified that this is largely an administrative change, and that is opinion I am largely in agreement with. And believe me, it is very rare that the DEA and I agree about anything. But at the end of the day, this reads to me, and it read like this at the time it was initially proposed, to be a recognition by DEA that more and more licensed researchers want to work with marijuana extracts, that more states are passing laws to facilitate research using marijuana extracts. And this is an internal administrative change to create a new code specific to these products, to track these products when DEA or Schedule I licensed researchers are permitted to work with them.
You mentioned that this was brought up for comment over 5 years ago. And of course, over 5 years ago was before the Dr. Sanjay Gupta special, Weed, where we learned about CBD oil and Charlotte Figi and the little kids who have epilepsy who are helped by the CBD oil. Since that time, we've had a number of companies that have come into play offering this CBD oil and mentioning that it's legal in all 50 states because it's derived from hemp. Can you get into this controversy and why these people think hemp makes a difference, and tell us why it doesn't?
Well, again, there's a number of questions here. One is, what is the scheduling status of cannabidiol?
Yes.
And as I've pointed out on numerous occasions, cannabidiol itself already has its own DEA tracking number. It's had it for some time. And I am under the impression, as are most of the experts in this field, that cannabidiol and all of the organic constituents or active organic constituents in cannabis already fall under the Schedule I label. The DEA itself is clear about this issue, acknowledging that drugs or substances can be in Schedule I under the CSA, even if they are not individually identified in the CSA as Schedule I drugs. And that's the case if we're talking about a substance that is meant for human consumption, if that substance is structurally or pharmacologically similar to a drug that is listed in Schedule I, and if this substance is not recognized by the FDA as a medicine. And clearly, cannabidiol and other cannabinoids in marijuana fit that description. They are ingested by humans. They are not FDA-approved medicines, and most certainly they're structurally and pharmacologically similar to marijuana or to THC.
The argument that I get in response from some of these advocates is related to some decisions that had to do with hemp back in the early 2000s when the DEA wanted to try to ban hemp oils and hemp shampoos and hemp soaps and things like that.
Right.
How does that?
We're talking about granola bars and products sold in Whole Foods and places like that.
So how does that not apply?
Well, again, if someone can show me where in that decision the word cannabinoid, cannabidiol, or marijuana extract appears, I would be persuaded, or at least I would reconsider my opinion with regard to whether that food decision, a decision specifically about food products that were not containing psychotropic substances, how that would apply to these products. But in my mind, these seem largely to be apples and oranges. And I have yet to see a single decision from a judge at any level that explicitly says that decision applies to these sort of products that are marketed in this way.
So I was in Texas recently and got to meet a storefront owner who was selling many of these CBD products supposedly derived from hemp, and more specifically derived from hemp stalk, they say, is what makes it legal for some reason. But so these people, these folks, these businesses, all the way down to the storefront owners, they're just flouting Schedule I law right now and haven't been busted yet?
That certainly seems to be the case. Again, I also have heard the argument that if one can say the product itself was derived from a part of the marijuana plant that is exempt under federal law, like the stalk from hemp or like the non-germinating seeds from hemp, that these products then may find a loophole in the federal law. That may indeed be the case, but I am dubious that the sort of products we're talking about are actually derived from those sources. CBD is a cannabinoid, and as such, it is most prominently found in the flowering tops of the cannabis plant. It is not particularly prolific, if it's found at all, in the hemp stalk. It's certainly not found in the seeds, and I have a very hard time believing that any pure and potent CBD product would be derived from such a source.
All right. Paul Armentan is the Deputy Director of NORML. And Paul, let's get a look at what's going on with regard to CBD at the federal level, because, you know, this swept through the states in 2014 and 2015, the powerful images of kids, you know, getting healed by CBD oil. What sort of federal legislation is on tap to try to address this, try to bring some relief to these parents?
Well, this is part of the irony, is that there are several different bills pending in the United States House, pending in the U.S. Senate, that, if enacted, would reclassify CBD, would deschedule CBD. Self-evidently, these federal legislative efforts would not be necessary if, in fact, CBD were already legal for human consumption. Obviously, these lawmakers don't believe that is the case. Obviously, their staff and their legislative directors don't believe this to be the case. And obviously, they would be the folks who would know. Furthermore, I'm of the understanding that there are, in the not-so-distant future, expected to be some fairly large-scale safety liability studies looking at CBD. And the end game, or the hope, is that the results of these studies will provide further scientific and political cover for ultimately rescheduling CBD at the federal level.
Okay, well, that would be good news for patients in many states that are relying on this. And we encourage everyone to check out NORML's website, where they'll have all of the action alerts and the pages you need to subscribe to get more information on this. And Paul, we appreciate you taking some time to join us here on the show, because this is a very controversial topic, and there's just so many people out there getting fed the notion that somehow this hemp CBD is legal. And I worry for them. I worry for them getting busted and having to find out the hard way. So thanks for what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Russ, for having me. I hope I could clarify the issue for some. I'm sure I didn't clarify it for everybody. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all on the same team here. We're all on the same page. And what we all want to see is an environment where these products definitively are legal, not just for patients, but for any adult who wishes to access them.
Absolutely. Glad to hear it. And thank you so much for all you're doing. And we'll be back in touch the next time we have a complex and controversial subject that needs debunking. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Russ.
All right. Stay tuned, folks. We're going to come back. We'll have time for a radical rant. We're going to ask, why doesn't legalization get the credit for reducing youth drug and alcohol use to its lowest recorded levels ever? We're going to dig deep into the Monitoring the Future survey and its latest figures when we return.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Seed to sale, clicks to conversions, and more. You're listening to the Cannabis Radio Network.
Do you want to get in on the booming cannabis industry? With New Frontier Data, we give industry insiders the power of big data analytics to help navigate this rapidly growing and changing landscape. New Frontier's tools help you make critical decisions based on the facts. Our industry analyst reports reveal the best opportunities, our custom research engagements deliver answers to the most difficult questions, and our cutting-edge big data platform, Equio, puts real-time information and answers you need right at your fingertips. Go to www.equio.io and sign up for your free membership today. That's EQUIO.io to sign up now. The power of real-time big data is now in your hands. Run with New Frontier and let us help you conquer the wild.
It's time to Hemp Present.
I am going to titillate your audio orifices with weekly radio rendezvous with some of the premier movers, shakers, and history makers of the cannabis community.
Radio resident hempo sapien Vivian McPeak.
I will be putting out a call to action on issues of the day and putting your interest under the big lights as I provide cannabis commentary and weekly interviews that go straight for the nugular.
Marijuana! Hemp Present, only on Cannabis Radio.
Sweet sativa,
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Today in the rant, I want to talk about one of my favorite logical fallacies. It's called post hoc ergo propter hoc. That's Latin that stands for because this, then that. And what it means, it's the kind of fallacy that says, you know, something happened and then something else happened and therefore they're related, right? Like you'd say, you know, oh, we look at the stats and there's more ice cream eaten in the summertime and there's more shark deaths in the summertime, therefore eating ice cream causes shark deaths. No, they just happen to both correlate to the fact that it's summertime, right? So this fallacy is used most famously in marijuana reform when it comes to our opponents calling marijuana a gateway drug. And it's this post hoc ergo propter hoc. It says, well, first people tried marijuana and then they moved on to heroin. Therefore, marijuana caused the heroin. And it is a logical fallacy. It's kind of a great simple way to debunk it is to note that while almost every person that's ever used heroin started with marijuana, most people that use marijuana do not move on to heroin. There's like 30 million marijuana smokers. There's like 300,000 heroin users, right? So what kind of lousy gateway is that only 1 out of 100 people can get through? Okay. And the other way to look at it is this way, is that they're looking backwards. You're looking through the wrong end of the binoculars here. Yes, people that use heroin likely started with marijuana, just like people who are in the Hells Angels likely started on a tricycle. It doesn't mean buying your kid a tricycle is going to turn him into Sons of Anarchy, okay? It doesn't work that way. It just so happens that the progression of drug use tends to follow a certain order, and it could be that people that have more or less aversion to risk tend to want to use these drugs and so forth. So if you really want to look for the gateway, it's cigarettes and alcohol, but that's a whole nother rant. The reason I bring up this post hoc ergo propter hoc is because it's fascinating to me how quickly this is seized on by our opponents when there's something bad about marijuana, right? When marijuana happens and then say a kid jumps out of a balcony after eating an edible, or a guy shoots his wife, or the latest one I debunked yesterday where the teenager stabbed and hacked up his friend, decapitated his friend after they smoked some joints, right? Obviously, these people have some severe issues going on. It's not the marijuana that's causing the problem. But boy, when it comes to our opponents, they'll jump right on that, won't they? Oh, this happened, then that happened. Obviously, they're related. But when marijuana seems to cause something good to happen, post hoc ergo propter hoc is nowhere to be found. And I bring this up in the context of the latest numbers from the Monitoring the Future survey. This comes out from the University of Michigan. They've been doing it since 1975. So we got over 40 years of data in this particular survey. And I've been collecting this data since I started working for Normal back in 2008. So I have this awesome spreadsheet, folks. Oh boy, it's just a masterpiece of Microsoft Excel that I've been tracking the lifetime use, annual use, monthly use, and daily use of drugs, marijuana, alcohol, and cigarettes for 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders since 1975. It's sitting right in front of me. I got all the numbers right in front of me. And Excel also has this really cool feature, this conditional formatting feature. You can tell it, hey, take all the numbers that are in the top 10 and turn them green. And take all the numbers that are in the bottom 10 and turn them red. So I've done this with this spreadsheet over the years to be able to track how marijuana use has been changing amongst the kids, because, you know, we're all worried about the kids. What about the children? So as I look at this table, I'm noting that the lifetime use of any drug by 8th graders is the lowest level ever recorded. That's right. Here we are in 2016 with 8 states legalizing, 28 with medical, all these messages. What about the message we're going to send to the kids? Oh, if we legalize, they'll think it's okay to do drugs. And yet, amongst 8th graders now, we have the fewest 8th graders trying any drug ever. It's also low for the 10th graders. It's not the lowest ever yet, but it's really low. When we look at the number is 33.7. 1/3 of 10th graders have ever tried a drug in their life. And that's in the bottom 10 of all the years ever noted. It's a 1-year change of a drop of 2.9%. And among the 12th graders, the drug use is at 48.3%. At least almost half of high school seniors have tried at least one drug in their life. Now, that's not in the bottom 10, but it's still below the average for the past 40 years. In both 5-year and 1-year comparisons, there has been a decline in all drug use over the lifetime in all those categories. If we look at the drugs that aren't marijuana, let's take marijuana out of the equation. 8th grade lifetime use in the bottom 10. 10th grade and 12th grade, lowest ever recorded. If we take marijuana out of the question, the use of drugs by older teenagers is at its lowest ever recorded rates. 14% for 10th graders, 20% for 12th graders of any other drug other than pot. But what about the pot, right? Oh my God, if we legalize pot, more kids are going to use it. That's not happening either. Amongst the 8th graders, it's at 12.8% lifetime use, bottom 10 ever. 29.7 for the 10th graders, bottom 10 ever. 44.5 for the 12th graders, still below average. And in fact, all of these measures are experiencing 5-year and 1-year declines. All of them. How about the alcohol? Well, in the case of alcohol, lifetime use of alcohol is the lowest level ever recorded amongst all age groups. 22% for 8th graders, 43% for 10th graders, 61% for seniors. Lowest levels ever recorded. Levels of getting drunk ever in their life, lowest levels ever recorded, all age groups. Use of cigarettes, lifetime, lowest levels ever recorded. Okay, so these are the lifetime figures. This is the experimenters. This is the, well, I tried it and I didn't like it, or I just never tried it people. What about the annual use? Did they use this year? Any drug? Bottom 10 for the 8th and 10th graders, below average for the 12th graders. Drugs that aren't marijuana, lowest levels ever recorded for annual use. For marijuana, bottom 10 for 8th and 10th graders, still below average for 12th graders. Annual use for 12th graders is 35.6%. That was a tiny increase of 2% from the previous year. which is statistically insignificant. Alcohol use, annual alcohol use, lowest levels ever recorded, all grade levels. Being drunk annually, lowest levels ever recorded. How about monthly use? This is your regular use, right? The monthly use. Surely the marijuana use is going to affect that, right? Well, for any drug use on a monthly basis, still bottom 10 for 8th and 10th graders, below average for 12th graders. There was a tiny, statistically insignificant increase for the 12th graders. Drugs that aren't marijuana. Lowest levels ever recorded for 10th graders, bottom 10s for 8th and 12th graders. How about the use of marijuana? Bottom 10s for 8th and 10th graders, still below average for 12th graders. Monthly use of marijuana amongst high school seniors in 2016 is 22.5%. That is a slight increase, but still statistically insignificant. Alcohol use monthly. Did they drink alcohol this month? Lowest levels ever recorded, ever. All age groups. Been drunk this month. Lowest levels ever recorded, all age groups. Smoked cigarettes this month. Lowest levels ever recorded, all age groups. And folks, as I look at this spreadsheet, remember my spreadsheet does the bottom 10, right? It colors the bottom 10 green. The entire decade of the 2010s is green for alcohol and cigarettes. Every year since 2010 has been a bottom 10 year for alcohol and cigarettes. In fact, looking back on this, since 2008, every year, 2008 to 2016 has been a bottom 10 year for the use of alcohol and cigarettes amongst all grade levels. When it comes to the drugs that aren't marijuana, since 2008, amongst all grades, almost every single one of them is a bottom 10 year for drugs that aren't marijuana. And finally, we go to the daily charts. Same kind of story on the daily charts. Use of marijuana daily among 8th and 10th graders, bottom 10s. The use daily among seniors is unchanged, still about 6%. Daily alcohol use, lowest ever. Been drunk every day, lowest ever. Smoke cigarettes every day, lowest ever. So why don't we get post hoc ergo propter hoc on this? Why don't people go, look, gee whiz, since we legalized marijuana, kids are using far fewer drugs. Since we legalized marijuana, kids are drinking less. Since we legalized marijuana, kids aren't smoking cigarettes anymore. How come post hoc ergo propter hoc doesn't work for us? And this is despite the fact that when it comes to the perception of risk, they say, hey, if people try marijuana, is that really risky? Among high school seniors, that's a bottom 10 rating. Use occasionally, bottom 10 rating. And use regularly, bottom, lowest rating ever recorded. So this is the issue that we've got when it comes to these studies, this monitoring the future, is the fact that we are getting the lowest recorded rates despite the fact that kids more than ever don't see a problem with it. If the kids don't see a problem with it and yet they're using it less, doesn't that tell us something? Doesn't that tell us that we've got a situation where we are having people use these drugs, where you're having people make these decisions that in no way are reflecting what the reality is out there? All right, that's all the time we got here for this, and I'm having some problems with the connection, so I'm going to keep talking while I get that booted back up. Hopefully we'll get the theme to play again while we're booting that back up. This is what happens when we do it live on a laptop. Russ Belville Show from beautiful, legal Portland, Oregon. Appreciate everyone out there who's been listening, and if you're still out there listening, it's still trying to set up the audio studio. There we are. It's not easy doing this live sometimes. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry for the disconnection. We're back for hour 2. Stay tuned. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.